Today we're going to solve equations. So hopefully I can read this. Hopefully you can read this. I got solve radical equations. And then the other thing is solving absolute value equations. So we're basically putting A6 and A10 all as in one section. Remember, A is the appendix. That's algebra and algebra 2 review type topics. Okay. So again, get out a piece of paper. You can't just sit here and watch me go through this stuff. If you were in H15 right now with me, we'd be saying, hey, let's get our stuff out. Let's get our notes out. If you can't add, subtract, multiply, or divide, let's get our calculator out. And let's get her done. So let's do it. We got square roots and absolute values. We're not going to do every single example if you got your notes here with you. Okay, I am actually going to start in on this one. So I'm going to zoom in here on number 2. Easy peasy one. When we're working through square roots or cube roots in this case, that's a third root. Okay, that's called the index, that number right there. So I'll rewrite this so it's nice and pretty so you guys can see it nice and pretty. I have the cube root of 1 minus 2x, and then outside of the cube root is minus 1 equals 0. We always want our root equal to the stuff. Okay, we always want the root by itself. And the reason why we want that is so now we can isolate the root and then square it both sides, or cube root, or cube both sides. So I take a look. I need to get this guy all by itself. Sam, what do we got to do? How do we get this all by itself? I think we need to move this 1 over. Good job, Sam. Sam says we need to move this 1 over. Sam, you're the best. Thanks, Mr. Gotsch. All right, I get the cube root of 1 minus 2x equals 1. And now we're ready to go ahead and cube both sides. So we cube both sides. And now this is a basic algebra equation. I've got 1 minus 2x is equal to 1. And then my last step, go ahead and subtract the 1 over. We get negative 2x equals 0. And then we divide by negative 2. And 0 divided by anything is 0. And it is okay to get 0 as a solution. Okay? Totally fine. Now, before you put that into my math lab, we should always check it, because every once in a while you can get what we call extraneous solutions. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and plug it in. Usually I plug it in to where I have my cube root or square root equal to my stuff. All right. So go ahead and check these. You're going to want to every once in a while. It doesn't work out. I'm going to plug in 0. I've got the cube root of 1 minus 2 times 0. And that equals 1. Well, that's the cube root of 1 equals 1. And the cube root of 1 is 1. So that checks out. Okay, so you definitely want to be checking these square roots, cube roots. Because every once in a while it doesn't work out. So double check. All right. Dylan, thanks for joining, bud. We're working on A6, A10 notes.
Yeah, my bad. I have some issues getting in.
No worries. Thanks for coming. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go and dive into a little bit harder one here. I'm going to example 1. So I take a look at this one. Now I have a square root of 12 minus x, and then minus x equals 0. So what's the first thing we got to do here? What do you guys got to do? Johnny, Shay, Natalie, Emily, what can we do here? When we have square,
X to the other side.
Yeah, we want our stuff on one side and the root on the other. So we want our square root equal our stuff. So square root equals our stuff. So Johnny said, hey, let's add this x over. So I've got the square root of 12 minus x equals x. All right, we want to solve for x. How do we solve for x here? Lillian, Zoe, Faith, Dominic, what can we do? Suggestions.
Don't use square both sides.
Square both sides. Fantastic. All right, we get 12 minus x equals x squared. Okay. Well, now we're dealing with a quadratic, and we solved quadratics yesterday. Do you see why we did A3 yesterday now? So yes, or A3, A6. A6 was solving quadratics, and we learned like 4 different ways to do it. We learned factoring, square root method. We learned quadratic formula, completing the square. Okay. Now, if it was my choice, the first thing I would do is try to see if I can't factor this thing. All right. So if we're going to factor this thing, I want all my stuff equal to 0. Okay. There's no way I would be completing the square unless I had to. So let's go ahead and get all of our stuff on one side. Now you could subtract x squared over, but then that guy's negative. I don't like dealing with a negative coefficient in front if I have to factor. Just it confuses kids, confuses me. So I'm going to do addition of x and subtraction of 12. So now I have 0 equals x squared plus x minus 12, or x squared plus x minus 12 equals 0. That way, this is a nice, pretty trinomial meal I can factor. Again, you could move that x squared over, but then that would be negative. And then you would probably divide by a negative anyway. So, all right, let's factor. Teach me how to factor. Teach me how to factor. That was probably in your brain all night last night. James was singing that to mom and dad. Yeah, teach me how to factor. Teach me how to factor. All right, how do we factor this thing? James, Rachel, Adam, Nolan, give me factors of negative 12 that add up to 1x. Who's got them? Factors of negative 12. Could be 12 and 1, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. How do we factor this thing?
4 negative 3.
Love it. Factors of x squared are x and x, and then factors of negative 12, 4 and negative 3 multiplied give you negative 12, added gives you 1. Fantastic. All right. Set each one of these equal to 0. Yesterday we said, well, the trick is just do opposite sign. So x plus 4 would turn into a solution of negative 4, and x minus 3 turns into a solution of 3. Okay? Before you punch those into my math lab, especially for square roots, the square root symbol looks like a check mark, which is a reminder you should check these. Okay? So I'm going to go and put those back into this spot where I have the root isolated. Okay? So square root, 12 minus a negative 4. And if you can't see this, let me know. But that's equal to negative 4. Okay? Well, 12 minus negative 4 is 12 plus 4. That's the square root of 16. What's the square root of 16? Positive 4, right? Well, this says the square root of 16 is equal to negative 4. That is not the answer. This guy is not one of my solutions. Okay, so if you just find the answers and then plug them into my math lab, you're not going to get them right every time. There's those extraneous solutions. So that one does not work. Okay, plug in 3. I get 12 minus 3. equals 3. Well, that's the square root of 9 equals 3. That works out. So only answer we have is x equals 3. Okay? So pretty much, and I'll just write this on another sheet of paper. Pretty much anytime you get a square root equal a negative number, okay, I'll write it like that so you can see it. Anytime I get a square root equal negative number, that is no solution. Okay, for that value. You cannot have square roots equal negative. So once you plug those in and you say, oh, it's negative, it's not going to work out. Okay. All right. Do we need to see another one? Do you want to see another square root one? One more? Let me give you one more hard one. One more hard one. We'll make it 3. And if you guys have questions, you can't see something, say something. Don't just sit here with your mics off, eating breakfast. Man. All right, next one. Here I have 2 plus the square root of 12 minus 2x, and that equals x. Okay? So Johnny, the first thing he said is, let's get that square root by itself, so we need to move this 2. So let's go ahead and move that guy. So I'm going to subtract 2 over. I've got 12 minus 2x equals x minus 2. Last cube root on, or square root one. All right. What can we do now? Chris, Dylan, Nora, Tyler, what can we do? How do we get rid of that square root, guys?
We square both sides.
Yeah. Now, when I square this side, that's easy. I get 12 minus 2x. But when I square this side, I'm squaring that whole side. I've got to square that binomial. And yesterday we talked about, well, you must FOIL that. First, outers, inners, lasts. All right, so I have x minus 2 quantity squared. That's x minus 2 times x minus 2. That's x squared. Negative 4x. So negative 2 and negative 2 is negative 4x. Negative 2 times negative 2 is plus 4. Awesome. All right, we got a quadratic. Alina, Jesus, Anthony, Aiden, what can we do now? How do we solve this quadratic? What do you guys want to do?
If you add the 2x on both sides and then subtract 12 on both sides.
Awesome. Get your stuff equal to 0. Good job, Aiden. Now we get 0 equals x squared. Negative 4x plus 2x is a negative 2x. And 4 minus 12 is a negative 8. And then we say, teach me how to factor. Teach me how to factor. We got x squared, x and x. And we got to come up with factors of negative 8. That adds up to negative 2. Right? Where's my girl Sam? Sam, how do you answer this one? What are factors of negative 8? Mr. Gotch, it's negative 4 and 2. Nice job, Sam. Sam is awesome. Thanks, Mr. Gotch. Oh, man. All right, my solutions. Potential solutions. +4, -2. And Mr. Gotch always says, hey, check it. Make sure it works out. Can you guys guess which one's not going to work?
-2.
Yep. -2 doesn't work. Okay. I would plug it into this one. I'll write that for our notes so you guys can see it. If I did 12 minus 2 times -2, that's equal to -2 minus 2. Well, that's again the square root of 16 equals -4. That does not work. But basically what I do is I'll look at the square root equal the number, the stuff, plug it in. If this turns into a negative, no solution. So the only answer that works in my math lab for me is x equals 4. Okay? Before you guys take that quiz, I'll remind you, anytime you're solving those square root equations, that square root looks like a check. You guys got to check those. Make sure you don't have any extraneous solutions. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think I've shown you all you need for square roots. Okay? We're going to dive into A10 now, which is solving absolute values. Do you have any questions before we move on to the backside? Any issues? This is super easy stuff. Like on the OMG scale, I would say this is like a 4 or 5. It's not too bad. When we start getting 7, 8, 9s, oh my gosh. All right, here we go. Backside. Let's do it. Absolute values. First thing we want to know is what in the world is an absolute value? Do we know what the absolute value of 7 is? Shout it out.
Is it just 7?
It's 7. And we know the absolute value of -7. That's just 7. Do you guys know what the definition of absolute value is? Why do I get both +7 here?
Is it its distance from 0?
Yeah, you guys are awesome. That is the distance from 0. Okay. Well, when we are doing like the absolute value of x equals 7, zoom out just a touch more so we can get it all in here. When we look at the absolute value of x is equal to 7, we know that there are two values that work in that. I could plug in 7 and get 7, and I could plug in -7 and get 7. So we got to know that there are two solutions that work. Okay? So that's the big idea today. We're trying to get that absolute value all by itself. Okay? We're trying to get that guy all by itself and then set up two equations. So, for example 5, I've got the absolute value of 3x minus 1 equals 2. That's 3x minus 1 equals 2. And 3x minus 1 equals -2. All right. The nice thing is when you solve these, it's exactly the same thing. Notice that this stays, what's inside stays 3x minus 1. It's not 1 as 3x minus 1 and 3x plus 1. It's the guy on the outside of the absolute value that changes. So I solve these exactly the same way. I'm going to add 1 and add 1. So now I've got 3x equals 3 and 3x equals -1. Divide by 3. And I get x equals 1 and -1/3. You can check those if you want, but we don't have to worry about extraneous solutions here. It's not an issue. Okay. You guys good with that? Oh, we lost somebody. All right, so the next one, I've got the absolute value of 2 minus x equals -1. right there, that does not make sense to me. Can we ever get an absolute value giving a distance that's negative? I'm seeing Emily shaking her head. Yeah, we can't do that. So remember, it's the distance from zero. Distance is always positive, and they're saying, hey, this distance is a -1. That's crazy. That's no solution. Circle the slash through it, right? No solution. Can't do it. You can't have an absolute value equal a negative number. Makes no sense from that definition. So fantastic. That was easy. All right, we got one more. This one, I've got the absolute value of x squared minus 16 equals 0. Okay. Well, plus or minus 0 is just 0. So this one, I only have to set up one equation. So only have to do one equation. Let's do the square root method. Let's add the 16 over. You could also factor this, either way. I get x squared equals 16, and we square root it. And y'all would say, what's the square root of 16?
4.
Ooh, close.
4 negative minus 4.
Yeah, don't forget the plus or minus. Okay? Don't forget the plus or minus. I'm a highlighting guy. You guys got to figure that out. So if you're hopefully taking notes, highlight that again. Because you guys should be looking at your notes before we take quizzes and tests. That's how you verify, make sure you know what you're doing. And that's it, guys. Okay. That's pretty much all the examples I want to show, except I have one other thing. If I have, let's say, and I'll just make this up, if I have I have 2 times the absolute value of x equals 4. You might have a 2 in front. Well, we still want to isolate the absolute value. So this is 2 times that absolute value. Just divide by 2. We get the absolute value of x is equal to 2, and that's just x equals plus or minus 2. Okay. So there might be some algebra you have to do to isolate that absolute value, but it's going to be pretty easy stuff. Adding, subtracting over, okay, dividing. What you can't do on example 5, what you can't do is like add the 1 over. You can't do that until you break it down into plus or minus. It mathematically doesn't work out like that. Okay? Yes, you will get one of the solutions right if you add 1 right away, but you won't get the negative solution right. You'll like be half right. Be like 50%. You don't want to be getting 50% on that question. You want the whole thing. All right, all right.